What do you think it would be like ministering to someone who's dying? My guest today knows the answer to that. Hi, I'm Jack Knight. Welcome back to Wordnet. And I say welcome back because I hope you've been watching our program, and if you haven't, that you will continue. My guest today is a Catholic nun from the Precious Blood Order, Sister Terry Maher, and she has spent a great deal of time ministering to the sick as a hospital chaplain, and I'm pleased to welcome you to the set here on
Thank you.
Wordnet.
I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Now, a number of people in religious life I've talked with have said, oh, it was my devotion to the Blessed Mother that brought me to ministry and religious life. And for you, when we were talking earlier, you said it was niggling brought you to the sisterhood.
Yes.
Talk about that.
I call it a niggling because it was a persistent something that would never go away. So it stayed with me. My experience of Catholic schools, my experience of sisters was only in the first grade. So when this thought entered my mind, it was like I have no idea what a sister is. So I had to explore what that was, and at the same time I was dating, so it just didn't seem to go together. And so it was something I couldn't ignore, so I had to explore it. My hope was, or my intention was, I didn't want to go through the rest of my life saying, what if? So if I dismissed that call to religious life, I might spend the rest of my life saying, what if? So I had to pursue it, and here I am.
I never, although I went to Catholic school as in elementary school, and I remember Sister Giovanna and Sister Mary Patricia and Sister, what the heck was her name? She kept me after school one day. I didn't even know what I had done. And another nun came in, Sister Giovanna came in, they were talking, and then Sister came over and she says, well, I've been talking it over with Sister, and we've decided to let you go early. Now I want you to say 3 Hail Marys every day so the Blessed Mother will watch over you and keep you from doing anything bad. I still do that, just about.
Wow.
But,
Influence.
I had great respect for the nuns. Never felt the rulers on the head. Never saw any of that kind of thing. And then went to public school after that because they had sports. And my family thought that maybe if I excelled at sports, they could afford to send me to college. And that's pretty much the way it worked out. And I went to a Catholic university in graduate school. Always been close to the church, was in CYO as a kid. So although I had exposure, I never had the niggling.
Wow.
God had something else in mind. After you got into religious life, what did you direct your attention to, or was that done for you?
No, I actually, before I entered, I worked. I was doing parish work in Oceanside, California. I was the director of religious education there. Entered religious life, spent the time as a novice, came out of the novitiate and continued as a director of religious education. Spent some time working with youth and then went to graduate school. Got my master's from Catholic Theological Union in Chicago. Once that was completed, then I entered parish work as pastoral associate. So I stayed in parish work for a good chunk of time, and then translated those skills into hospital ministry as a chaplain.
That was quite a jump, I would think, from going to work with something that was active and moving on and things to do, stuff to take care of, and then narrowing down your work to the chaplaincy and working with the dying and bereavement?
To some degree, but perhaps the blessing toward that is when I was pastoral associate, part of my responsibilities was visiting the homebound and the hospital. So I was gaining those skills with the parish work that I was doing, hospital and homebound ministry.
I wonder how hard it is, and I've thought about this, being a Eucharistic minister and visiting the sick at home and in the hospitals and things like that. How difficult was it for you when the first person you were ministering to you passed away?
That's a hard one to answer. I kind of fell back on my own experience of people dying. Now, I've never, in my own family, I've never had to watch someone die, never had to sit at somebody's bedside who had been sick for a long time as they were passing away. My family, I'm Irish, so we have to find humor in everything. So I usually say my family are either killed or drop dead, because that's what happens.
Yeah.
So I know traumatic death. Thankfully, in one of the parishes where I worked, there was a bereavement ministry already established. They're the ones who taught me how to be comfortable with death, how to be comfortable with someone who is dying. So even when I teach the class now, when I teach grief, when I teach bereavement, my approach is, if you were in that class, I would say to you, you minister to people as you would want to be ministered to. So if you're sitting with someone who is dying, what would you want from that person who's sitting with you as you die? And that's what you give to the individual.
I was fortunate in one way to be thousands of miles away from my parents when they passed. So I was there. I didn't have to suffer that period of time when I know they're going and when is it going to be, and now it's happened. It was after the fact. When you think about what the future will bring without that person for their family and so forth. So you're not only ministering to them, I assume, but to those others that are around them that have been at bedside, that you've met them. How do you manage that?
Very often I rely on what my gut tells me to do, and when I say gut, I probably more refer to what the Spirit is guiding me to do. Even this morning I walked into a patient room who had just died. And my focus was obviously on those that the deceased patient left behind, calling them by name, asking them what their name is and kind of putting it in my head, remember who's who. So as we're ministering to them, I could call each person in that room by name. That's important. And then know the name of the deceased before I even get there. Call them by name. So it's, in one way, it's maybe a way to enter into that family gathering, but also know I'm not a member of the family. Looking at them eye to eye, and just entering into what needs to be entered into. Not being fearful of the tears, not being fearful of whatever anger may be floating out there. That's not to say that was happening this morning, but those are the things that a person can enter into as a chaplain or as a parish minister into a room of someone who has died. They may have they have been the companion of someone who is dying, and then still be very angry that that person died.
Oh, yeah. My pastor has an incredible memory. Whenever I go to a daily mass and it's remembering somebody who has passed on, or even on a Sunday when they talk about a prominent member of the community, he knows grandchildren's names, and he brings that really personal thing and brings that person alive again.
It's very important to people.
Yeah.
Very important.
And how important it is for what you said to get names and be able to make a personal connection between the dying and the family itself. We've got a few minutes left in this segment, and I want to talk about the workshops that you might have been involved with, and probably still are. Tell me about that.
Well, for the Diocese of San Bernardino, I do teach, if that's the right word, parish folks how to create or establish a bereavement and grief support in their parish. So that's looking at what are the components of grief, as well for what is called term normal death, whatever that may mean, as well as for traumatic death, because the grief components are so different.
Oh, I imagine someone killed in an accident, someone a long, slow death. There's
someone who's completed suicide. So there's a variety of what's listed as traumatic death as opposed to normal death. And both of those involve individuals looking at what their relationship with the deceased was, if we need to talk about reconciliation, the role of forgiveness. All of that goes into in those workshops. We look at how to what kind of bereavement ministers you want, because a lot of parish people are very good-hearted people, and we're grateful. We're grateful. Not everybody is meant to do that kind of work.
We're going to take a break. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. Stay with us, will you? Because there's some very important things you might want to know.
In life, we are not alone. We live with and among people. We constantly enter into contact and relationship with others. Some of these relationships are very formal and superficial, but some are very deep and intimate. How do relationships work? We can all easily relate with those relationships that have been wounded, which are sometimes even bleeding. Father Martin Padovani, SVD, has written a book called Healing Wounded Relationships. It is the result of his many years of work as a marriage counselor. He deals with some of the very simple but pertinent topics like communications, listening, intimacy, forgiveness, reconciliation, and dealing with anxiety and fear. And of course, a very practical question: how do you make a marriage work? You will surely be enriched by this book. You should get it for yourself, or maybe get a copy for a relative or a friend. Be blessed by this book and improve your relationships.
Call the number on the screen or email us to get your copy. You can also place your order by visiting our website. Do it today.
Thanks for coming back with us. We're with Sister Terry Maher, a Precious Blood Order nun. She's been a hospital chaplain, working with the dying, working in workshops for people in bereavement and forgiveness. A former Navy brat, so she has traveled some. Her dad was a deacon, so she had a religious influence in her family. And I've been very interested in what you've been saying about the different sides of bereavement. There's the family. There are people like myself who have a particular interest in the safety of police, fire, and so forth. And when a policeman dies or a fireman, it affects me.
It gets you in your gut.
Yeah, it really does. Can you think of a time when you had to face somebody who wasn't interested in bereavement, but more vengeance? Vengeance against God for taking their loved one, vengeance against somebody who caused this person's death, things like that?
Yeah, I've met that, but I wouldn't be able to tell you of an incident.
Yeah.
I have learned that the best or the worst can come out in family relationships at a time of death. It could be because relationships have been so broken throughout the deceased life that some of that is seen vividly at the death of somebody. Or the relationship was so strong that you still get strong emotions. People can be very angry because I've learned within myself and have listened to others that the anger at God is because people need to work out what their relationship, what their image of God is. If we believe that God is in control, God can do all things, and here this person died after I've been pleading for days for them to be healed, God doesn't do it.
What about euthanasia? Family members, some say, let's let them die, and others will say, no, we have to let God be in charge of all of that.
Mm-hmm.
You face that as well?
No. I work at a Catholic hospital. We do not promote euthanasia, nor do we promote physician-assisted suicide.
Mm-hmm. When you first meet relatives, is there a kind of a standard approach to how you prepare them for the loss?
If we're lucky to be able to be with a family prior to the death of somebody, we can, what I like to do is learn about who that person is. If the person is married, I like to learn how the individuals met. Great stories. I've heard of, like, wow, really? You know, wonderful. They're just very, very humbling kinds of stories. What was their life like? What kind of work did that person do? What gave that person life and energy? Begin to talk about those relationships. So when we begin to talk about this person leaving, what are the memories that are going to be left? What are the memories this, I believe, the deceased loved one takes with them? So it helps with that transition. Very often, though, the chaplain's not called until after death. Our role as chaplains is hopefully to meet people before they get to that point. We don't always have that blessing.
Sometimes people come in to the hospital and their time is short.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. At other times, it's quite a prolonged situation.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any things that you have used to try to ease the ride?
Again, it depends on the situation. To give a specific story,
Yeah.
I'm gifted. Once I leave the hospital, I usually forget everything I did. Okay, so that's probably a gift for me. So I can't give you specifics. There are times when maybe a patient is really agitated, that I've learned how to play the Native American flute. So I'll bring that in, and that tends to be a calming, because what I've learned is with that flute, it's calming because the patient, family, and staff, their breathing begins to match mine, because the flute is played with your breath. And so if I can control my breathing, slow it down as I play that flute, that's what happens to the patients as well.
I think that's a unique kind of thing. Have you heard of other people doing that?
Well, I learned about it at a chaplain's workshop.
Really?
So when I was chaplain in the emergency room, every day I would pull my flute out and begin to play it. And you could in the whole emergency room, you could just feel the shift in the air.
Do you play songs that people would recognize?
No, when you play the native flute, my understanding, as I've learned it, is when the Native Americans play the flute, they play with their breath, so it's like singing with their breath.
Uh-huh.
So there is no. I'm sure you can play music on it, songs that people might know. I just don't do it.
I think I'd like to have a bluegrass band be playing when I was.
There you go. There you go.
Well, music hath charms to soothe the savage breast.
Yeah.
Well, besides playing the flute, there must be some other techniques that you may have been putting in your work bag.
I'll teach people how to do that deep breathing in through their nose and out through their mouth kind of thing, and that can be helpful. We use that with prayer. So we take, if they're Catholic patients or Christian patients, we'll take the Our Father and we'll breathe the Our Father. So we can breathe in. I have to speak it because I can't breathe through my nose and speak at the same time. So we might breathe in, Our Father, who art in heaven. Hallowed be thy name. So this is a prayer you say in your head, but you breathe those phrases. So you breathe in through your nose, Our Father. Breathe out through your mouth, who art in heaven. And again, that's a way to help people calm down. And I'm very upfront with them. I said, if you're like me, you'll probably get 3 breaths out before your mind starts thinking about everything else it wants to think about. But the Our Father gives you something to focus on. You can picture Jesus. If it's the Hail Mary, you can pray the Hail Mary with picturing Mary. Just something to help bring your body to ease and peace.
That's interesting that you say that, because I do a litany of prayers first thing in the morning and then at night when my head hits the pillow. And, for example, if I start off with the Hail Mary, and I picture the statue at church, the one with the moon and the stars and
Immaculate Conception.
I think so.
Uh-huh.
And then the Our Father is God reaching out to Adam, and it sort of pushes away any of the worldly things that have been bugging me. An interesting technique.
Yeah.
Boy, but the flute and breathing the Our Father, that is something new to me. Man, I'm going to try that. Not the flute, maybe. I have one, but I don't know how I'll try it.
Yeah, try it.
I'll try it.
It's very relaxing because when I was in the emergency room or when I played in the hospital, the staff will come to me and say, "Oh, that's so good." Sometimes I say to them, "Well, you don't know how much I need it." You know, they think I'm playing it for them, but maybe I'm playing it for myself too. You know, when I was in the emergency room, the EMTs that would come, they would ask me, "When are you playing? We want to have our run when you're playing." So.
I can imagine an EMT in an ambulance with somebody who's being rushed to the hospital going, "What the heck are you doing?
Yeah.
I'm dying. What are you playing?"
Yeah. Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, how long do you think you'll stay in this work? Is it a lifetime thing for you?
However long God wants me to be there. You know, I'm finding life and energy in it. So when I'm not at the hospital doing that, I work with families of murder and suicide. So it gives me a lot of energy. I enjoy it.
That's kind of another area too, isn't it?
Uh-huh.
Very intense.
Can be.
We had a former sister of St. Joseph of Peace talking about losing her brother to murder, and how do you get by? How do you forgive? I mean, when it's close like that, if a friend of yours, somebody you know, is killed, you say, "Oh gosh, that's terrible." But when it's your brother, your mother, somebody in the family, it's, the rage is sometimes.
And we have to let people feel that.
Yeah.
I mean, to talk about forgiveness, and I've had it said to me, because I've had family murdered, or to hear it come from somebody else, particularly good-meaning church folks, say, "Well, you have to forgive." Well, forgiveness really is not at the top of the list. It's a process. And we have to help people work through all those feelings of anger and hurt and questioning, all of that before we can get to a place maybe where forgiveness is going to be there. Tied with that, particularly with murder, is people have to wait a good chunk of time if the murderer has been found, if the body has been found, to go through the trial, which is a whole different set of emotions that get into play. So people really can't begin to grieve that death until after there's been a trial.
Boy, well, you have been an inspiration, I'm sure, to people out there who are facing this kind of thing right now. And I'll bet that tomorrow, every music store in this area is going to have an Indian native flute for sale for somebody who needs to go into the ER and play for somebody.
Well,
But all kidding aside, I want to ask God to help you continue the work that you do, which is special. And I want to tell our audience out there, I want to thank you for supporting this ministry. That'd be pretty good. And to be back with us next time.
thank you.
In life, we are not alone. We live with and among people. We constantly enter into contact and relationship with others. Some of these relationships are very formal and superficial, but some are very deep and intimate. How do relationships work? We can all easily relate with those relationships that have been wounded, which are sometimes even bleeding. Father Martin Padovani, SVD, has written a book called Healing Wounded Relationships. It is the result of his many years of work as a marriage counselor. He deals with some of the very simple but pertinent topics like communications, listening, intimacy, forgiveness, reconciliation, and dealing with anxiety and fear. And of course, a very practical question: how do you make a marriage work? You will surely be enriched by this book. You should get it for yourself, or maybe get a copy for a relative or a friend. Be blessed by this book and improve your relationships.
Call the number on the screen or email us to get your copy. You can also place your order by visiting our website. Do it today.